Hello and welcome back everyone for episode 2 of my best part-time drivers of 2022 series. In case you didn't see my last video over Kyle Weatherman, first of all make sure to check that out, but also all the details on the formatting of these videos and my definition of a part-time driver is in that video as well. So anyway, no need for any further introductions, hop right aboard the Bayne train. Following the 2021 Xfinity Series season, it was announced that the defending champion Daniel Hemrick would be leaving Joe Gibbs Racing in favor of the hotter-than-ever Chevy powerhouse Kaulig Racing, thus leaving his number 18 car in need of a new driver. With Ty Gibbs and Brennan Jones already confirmed to go full-time, and with Kyle Busch's retirement from the series, of course there was much speculation over who that driver would be. Most reasonably thought that Jonathan Nemechek would get the seat after his 5-win and regular season championship clinching year in the Truck Series, not to mention he's a Toyota driver. Perhaps another young Toyota driver like Corey Heim, who had just wrapped up a solid ARCA season, would skip the Truck Series altogether like Ty Gibbs and put together a rookie campaign. However, I don't think anyone would have predicted that then mostly retired and arguable NASCAR bust Trevor Bayne would be the one who got the call. Well, in addition to many others, as he was only part-time after all. Trevor Bayne came into the NASCAR racing scene all the way back in 2007, when only 16 years old, after scoring 4 top 5s and 6 top 10s in 21 total Hooters Pro Cup Series starts, he attempted his ARCA East, then known as the Busch East Series debut at Iowa Speedway. Bayne was behind the wheel of the number 00 machine for his family-owned team, which somehow managed to have sponsorship from Aaron's. Yeah, like the Aaron's Dream Machine, Aaron's Lucky Dog, and his future Nationwide Series sponsor, Aaron's. I did some research, and it doesn't appear Bayne had any ties to Michael Waltrip Racing yet, nor did his dad work for Aaron's at the time, so I'm not sure what strings had to be pulled for that to happen. Maybe it was just a local Aaron's franchise. I also couldn't find any pictures of the car. But yeah, anyway, Trevor DNQ'd for the race. In his defense, there were 10 other drivers who also didn't make the race, as this was a East and West Series combination race, which coincidentally also became the race that put this year's Cup Series champion Joey Logano officially on the map, after he held off Kevin Harvick in the closing laps to secure his second career win, also at only 16 years old. For the rest of the year, Trevor continued to compete in the Hooters Pro Cup Series, where he managed to pick up his first 2 wins as well as 7 top 5s and 13 starts. But he also only had 7 top 10s, so it appeared the talent was there, but not quite the consistency. He also went on to make his Busch East debut at Mansfield in his only other attempt of the season, in which he came home 26th due to his engine expiring on only the 22nd lap. Despite his misfortune in the East Series, Bayne's late model achievements were good enough to get signed to the Dale Earnhardt Incorporated Driver Development Program the following year, and he would compete for the team full-time in the East Series. He wasted no time, racking up 3 top 5s and 4 top 10s in the first 5 races, before going on to nab his first win in the series from the pole at Thompson Speedway Motorsports Park in the Pepsi Full Fender Frenzy 100. What a sentence there. After that hot start, Trevor faded back a bit for the rest of the season, falling from second in the points after his lone win to finish 4th overall. Competing with him all year were Jeffrey Earnhardt, future Cup winner Austin Dillon, and even Steve Park, but the driver who ended up winning the championship was, drumroll please, Matt Kobieluk, who I had never even heard of prior to making this video. Regardless, Trevor had a pretty solid rookie season, and with his win caught the attention of Michael Waltrip Racing, who had apparently decided that Trevor was Nationwide Series ready. However, that part-time deal didn't get put together until the 13th race of the year. So until then, he was pretty much in limbo, as over the off-season, DEI had merged with Chip Ganassi Racing, and all their 3 East Series teams from the year before ceased operations. Trevor was still technically in the Earnhardt Ganassi development program, but was only hired for 1 race, his Xfinity Series debut at Bristol, where he drove the Taco Bell number 52 car in a collaborative effort with Jimmy Means Racing en route to a P23 finish 4 laps down. He was also able to scrape together 1 East Series start with Dave Davis Motorsports at Tri-County Motor Speedway, which resulted in a 6th-placed effort, as well as 1 race in the USAR Pro Cup Series, no longer affiliated with the Hooters after 2008, that he won at Concord Speedway. Once Trevor got on board with Michael Waltrip Racing in the Nationwide Series, he delivered mixed results. He started off poorly at Nashville after getting collected in a multi-car crash, but then rebounded to 2 solid back-to-back 12th-place runs, before recording a 27th place finish due to crash damage at Gateway. That was basically the rhythm of Bayne's 2009 stint with MWR, but towards the end of the season, in another part-time deal with CGM Racing, he was able to put together some consistency, keeping it inside the top 20 for all 5 of his starts with them. One thing he did keep consistent through the entire season, though, was his qualifying runs, as he qualified inside the top 10 on 10 occasions, including 3 front-row starting positions, one of which being the pole at the Indianapolis Raceway Park. Overall, Trevor's season went about as expected for a young guy fresh out of ARCA, wrapping up his first year in the Nationwide Series with a best finish of 7th, both at IRP and Richmond, along with an average finish of 18.0. Another thing going for Trevor entering 2010 was that in many of the races when his finishes suffered because of on-track incidents, it was not his fault at all. From getting collected in a multi-car pileup at Nashville, to being an innocent bystander at Gateway to one of John West Townley's bonehead moves, to getting punted by the leader while trying to stand a lead lap in the second Bristol race, that leaves only 2 sub-20th place finishes, which were due to his own mistakes. Seeing his clear potential, Michael Waltrip re-signed Bayne for the upcoming season, but this time for a full-time championship-seeking campaign. For 2010, MWR had also merged with Gary Betchel's former Diamond Ridge Motorsports team to form a combined Diamond Waltrip Racing. The first half of their season saw really nothing outstanding besides those Aaron's Dream Machine and Out Pet Care paint schemes. Seriously though, apart from maybe Red Bull racing schemes, the MWR cars, especially their nationwide ones, are my favorite in pretty much all of NASCAR. But that's probably just from my nostalgia as I started watching around those years. Anyway, leaving Chicagoland, the 18th race of the season, Bayne had only garnered 1 top 5 and 3 top 10s, sitting at a disappointing 11th in the driver's standings, behind the likes of Stephen Wallace and Brendan Gaughan for reference. But the reason I take note of his season at this exact place is because it marks a complete turning point for the better. In the following weekends, Trevor would go back to his qualifying excellency and win 3 consecutive pole positions. And not only that, but he would go on to finish each of those races inside the top 5, a truly remarkable feat for any driver. This streak was by far the highlight of his season, as besides the 4 laps he's out front at Texas, the combined 95 laps he led in those 3 races, Gateway, IRP, and Iowa, were the only laps he led all year. Still, including those races, after Chicagoland, Bayne came alive with 5 top 5s and 8 top 10s, redeeming his first half of 2010. However, not all of those stats came with the Diamond Waltrip team, as after Dover, a staple team of NASCAR, and at that point in time, a far more promising team took note of Bayne's improved performance. A team that would shape the rest of his career. And that would, of course, be Roush Fenway Racing. Yeah, Bayne just straight up dipped from MWR and signed a multi-year contract with Roush. He piloted their cars for the remaining 7 races of the season, where he gave them an average finish of 14.3 and wound up 7th overall in the final standings. Around the same time, Trevor received his first Cup opportunity, where he would drive for the Wood Brothers Racing Team in the Fall Texas race. In his debut, Bayne did quite well and definitely more than he was expected to, with a lead lap P17 run, outrunning guys like Carl Edwards, Ryan Newman, and Kurt Busch. Because of that, the Wood Brothers were more than satisfied enough to offer Bayne a spot in their car for the next year, starting with the Daytona 500. Trevor Bayne entered the 2011 Speed Weeks, I'm sure, with less confidence than he would like, as his only other start at Daytona the prior year in Nationwide resulted in a lap 6 crash. No matter, he would take great care of his number 16 Ford, bringing it home in a solid 10th place, right behind his former boss, Michael Waltrip. With that boost going forward, Trevor might have felt a little bit better about his first Daytona 500, but not a single team owner, driver, fan, or anyone with a square inch of NASCAR knowledge could have expected the outcome of that race. Going into the 500, as always, the winner could be expected to be unexpected, as the super high speeds, tandem drafting, and overall chaos of superspeedway racing had led to significant upsets throughout its history, but none more so than the winner of that year's Great American Race. Still, 2 drivers had performed exceptionally well during the earlier parts of Speed Weeks and were the clear favorites to win. One was the pole sitter and proven superspeedway ace Dale Earnhardt Jr., who was hunting his second 500 win, while the other was the winner of both the exhibition shootout race as well as his qualifying duel race, Kurt Busch. But again, with how all the factors of Daytona racing can lead to surprise drivers running the best, it was none other than a 21st place starter, Ryan Newman, who led the most laps that day with 37 total, most of which coming towards the end of the race. However, with 4 laps remaining and every driver's heartbeat rising by the second, David Reagan soared to the inside of Newman in a 3-wide pass for the lead thanks to a big push from, well, Trevor Bayne. Yeah, with only a handful of laps to go in the 500, the young driver, and only his second Cup start, he stayed out of trouble all day and put himself in prime position during the closing laps. As is almost guaranteed by Daytona, though, the finish was to be determined in part by a restart, because in this case, less than a lap after Reagan had emerged as the new leader, Regan Smith received way too big of a push from the 3-car train in his rear, triggering a multi-car accident that collected both Newman and the only other driver to have led over 30 laps that day, Clint Bowyer. Now a green flag checkered overtime restart was in the works with a front row of Reagan and his drafting partner Trevor Bayne. Reagan, with a great push from Tony Stewart, took to the front immediately upon the drop of the green, but not overly discouraged, Bayne filed right back into line to again hook up with the number 6 car. All the teams would get a chance to go back to the drawing boards, however, as in the back of the pack, Robbie Gordon failed in his attempt to blend up from below the double yellow line and triggered yet another caution, and with it, a second attempt at overtime. But this go around, David Reagan was out of the equation. Due to an illegal lane switch prior to reaching the start-finish line the prior restart, Reagan was black flagged by the officials and would have to restart this time at the tail end of the longest line. This penalty moved Bayne up to the front row once again to match the veteran and that year's would-be champion Tony Stewart one-on-one in a 2-lap duel. This time, Bayne had help with a big shot from the 2000 Series champion Bobby Labonte that would rocket the duel into the lead. They kept it out front and single file, entering turn 3 on the final lap, but the tandem draft of Carl Edwards and David Gillen was quickly closing the gap. Exiting turn 4, Edwards, hungry for his first 500 win, expertly moved to the bottom of Labonte and was locked nose to bumper with Bayne coming to the line. But trapped side by side with Labonte for just a second too long, Edwards' huge surge of momentum was killed. Bayne held his number 21 Wood Brothers Ford tight enough to the double yellow line as to not allow Edwards any room under him, and in the moment that would define his career and life up to that point, the 20-year-old Trevor Bayne crossed the finish line first and would become the youngest ever driver to win the Great American Race. Can't top that, huh? Well, foreshadowing, in Trevor's case, he really couldn't. Ever. For the rest of his Cup season, Trevor settled back into reality with much more expected results for his underfunded team, ending up with no other top 10s in his 17 starts with an average finish of 25.8. Even worse, his championship hopes in a nationwide series would bite the dust when, after race 8 at Nashville, he would have to be hospitalized for multiple weeks due to what he thought was serious complications from an insect bite. This mystery condition was eventually revealed to be an even more troubling condition: multiple sclerosis. Fortunately for Trevor, his MS would never impact his racing career, and he carried on with business as usual, earning a third-place finish in his first race back at Chicagoland. Though obviously overshadowed by his 500 win, Bayne's first nationwide win also came in 2011 with a late race charge in the fall Texas race. In arguably an even bigger showcase of his driver talent, he would pull ahead of Carl Edwards on a late race restart and hold off a quicker Denny Hamlin at the finish in a field that also featured Clint Bowyer, Brad Keselowski, and Joey Logano. Due to his missed races, he could only muster an 11th place finish in points, but by no means did he have a bad season. His average finish went up from a 16.0 the previous year to a 13.7, and he collected his 1 win, 5 top 5s, and 14 top 10s in a bushwhacking season. At this point, he wasn't exactly Cup ready for Roush, but with a year or two more spent developing in a nationwide and running part-time with the Wood Brothers, he might just be the next big thing. That was the plan at least, but unfortunately for Trevor, we would see once again just how fast life can tear you down. 2012 began quite well for the driver of the now number 60 car for Roush, as in his first 5 races, he scored a top 5 and 3 top 10s. Like last year, his results weren't what would put a lid on his championship hopes, but this time, with Trevor healthy, it was the more typically seen lack of funding that stopped him and his whole team dead in their tracks. His car got an all too used to sporting the Ford logos on his side panels, or none at all, and Jack Roush simply was not able to keep the team afloat regardless of their contract or their impressive runs together. Luckily for Trevor, on the Cup side of things, his Wood Brothers ride, albeit still underfunded in general, was not in grave danger of shutting down. With only Cup to focus on for the rest of the year, Bayne came out of the 2012 season with far better statistics than 2011, apart of course from the wins column. The highlight of his year came early on at Las Vegas with a 9th place run on the 1.5 mile oval. On a standard track with no help from drafting, this was a huge step in the right direction for the team, and they followed it up a couple weeks later back at the Superspeedway, Talladega this time, where Bayne would cross the line 8th. After a rather consistent rest of his season, Bayne ended up in 16 starts, tallying those 2 top 10s, an improved 22.5 average finish, and only 1 DNF from a crash. Not bad at all. And what was even better for him was that during his time on the bench and over the offseason, he and Roush had been hard at work to secure sponsorship for the next season, and with much success, enough to make it through the entire 2013 nationwide schedule and hopefully finally contend for the championship. And thankfully for the fans, we got to see the Pillow Pets car on track for a handful of races. Going into the 12th race of the season at Iowa, Bayne in his yet again renumbered number 6 car set a fairly underwhelming 10th in points. His absolute roller coaster of results so far that year saw big highs right off the bat with the pole at Daytona, followed up with back-to-back 4th place finishes at Phoenix and Las Vegas, but big lows with 4 finishes outside the top 25 in the first 9 races. No matter, the Iowa race, along with a few others on a nationwide schedule, always presented a great opportunity to the series regulars, because in the days of bushwhacking, the Cup guys would for the most part be unable to compete. This being due to Iowa never making the Cup schedule, so in the same weekend, the Cup Series was racing somewhere else on the other side of the country. That year, Bayne took full advantage of these circumstances, and after some incredible side-by-side racing with the would-be champion Austin Dillon, regained the top spot with 12 laps to go and never looked back, picking up the win in a much cleaner fashion than the 6-car 2 years before. Something to note at this point, Trevor had never dominated a race, or even close. Out of his 3 wins across the top 3 divisions of NASCAR, he had led the most laps in his Iowa win with only 19. And unfortunately, this statistic would flip-flop for him for the rest of his career, as even though it was looking like he was just getting started, he was actually already finished in the wins department. Still, Bayne finished the 2013 season strong and regained much of his consistency, wrapping up with a 1 win, 7 top 5s, and a very impressive 21 top 10s. Coupled with an average finish of 11.5, only 1 DNF, and a 6th place overall ranking, he would enter the offseason fresh off a new career best season. Bayne once again raced with the Wood brothers in Cup, but in his 12 starts he failed to back up his top 10s from 2012, posting a best finish of 15th at Michigan. On the bright side, he took care of his equipment better than ever as he recorded no DNFs due to crashes. That couldn't be more in contrast to the following season, however. In the same number of starts that year, an already disappointing top finish of 19th was made even worse with 5 DNFs due to crashes and a straight-up distasteful 32.3 place average finish. In case you thought that was bad, in his first and only Cup attempt with the Roush, he was the sole D&Q of the Fall Charlotte race. Just an overall yikes. At least his nationwide season went similarly to the year before. Notice I don't say better. The only stat that improved was his 0.2 decrease in average finish. Other than that, he matched his top 10s and came back with 2 less top 5s and no wins. I'm making it sound a lot worse than it was, though, because by no means was this a bad performance from Trevor. He had plenty of great runs throughout the year, most notably an agonizing defeat and a runner-up finish to Kyle Busch in the Spring Dover race. On top of that, the future of his racing career was looking more clear than ever, as any funding doubts were totally erased by AdvoCare, who starting that year would provide full season sponsorship to the number 6 car. Despite the slight dip in results, Jack Roush felt Trevor was, at last, ready to compete full-time in the Cup Series for his powerhouse Ford team. But going into his 2015 rookie year, the standards for a team as a whole were down a notch from before. A bit down. The 2 best Roush drivers of the 2010s by a long shot, Matt Kenseth and Carl Edwards, were both out the door at this point, and almost insultingly, both now were racing for Joe Gibbs. That left a declining Greg Biffle, a still young and wreck-prone Ricky Stenhouse Jr., and of course the rookie Trevor Bayne. While in 2014, in his final season for his longtime organization, Edwards was able to deliver 2 wins and a 9th place finish in the final points, and Biffle qualified for the inaugural playoffs, it was clear the red arrow was trending downward and prone to hit the floor come 2015. But the show must go on. Roush Fenway Racing slowly and painfully trudged their way through the 2015 season, not scoring a single win across their 3 full-time teams for the first time since 1996, and growing their biggest winless streak since their first ever win back in 1989. Their season highlight was, what was it again? Biffle, Stenhouse, and Bayne all came in 20th or lower in the standings with a combined 4 top 5s and 9 top 10s. For comparison again, Carl Edwards alone put up 2 wins, 7 top 5s, and 14 top 10s just the year before. After that mess, rather smartly, Biffle decided it was time to go, and with no other veteran drivers wanting to take a risk on the shadow of what was once a dream landing spot in the Cup Series, and none of their nationwide drivers ready to take the next step up, 2016 would see Roush downsized to only 2 cars. Well, maybe that would allow the team to narrow in their focus and lead to performance improve. No, it would not. Nothing worthwhile anyway for Roush standards. Looking at the bright side, though, for Bayne at least, his 2016 season saw him capture his first Cup top 5, well, besides the 500 win, in the spring Bristol race. Unfortunately, his achievement was massively overshadowed by the next guy in the finishing order, Matt Benedetto, who somehow, someway took a BK racing car home in the 6th position. The Coke 0400 at Daytona was where Bayne delivered his only other top 5 of the year with a very promising 3rd place, and in a relatively clean race for a superspeedway as 23 drivers finished on the lead lap. His teammate Stenhouse also finished top 5, crossing the line in 5th, in what most definitely would be the best race for Roush as a whole that season. Including those 2 races, Bayne rounded out the 2016 season with 5 top 10s, only 1 DNF due to a crash, and a new career best average finish of 19.9. But winding up 22nd in the final points, while Stenhouse only managed to come up 1 spot better, made Jack Roush question what he was even doing anymore. In an interview with AZ Central Sports, the boss man said, quote, "I expected to have better years than the winless 2016 and 2015. Had I realized I had those years in front of me, I might have decided to sidestep and retire." End quote. Dang, how's that for some team morale? Obviously, old Mr. Roush is still out strong in 2022, but now heading into 2017, confidence was at an all-time low. That year it became evident that either Bayne or his equipment was at a peak, and it wasn't a very high one. He practically mirrored his stats from the previous season with the same points finish, the same 2 top 5s, 1 more top 10 with 6 total, and a fractionally improved average finish of 19.5, which can either be taken impressively or unimpressively when taking into account that he piled up 5 DNFs due to crashes. Although he did come in 3rd in the fall Talladega race, that race was an absolute demolition derby on about the same level as this past season's summer Daytona race. So Bayne's best performance was probably the 2nd Michigan race. On lap 197, the final caution of the day came out due to a wreck between Paul Menard and Michael McDowell, and after running well most of the day, Bayne lined up P6 alongside Chase Elliott for the restart. At the drop of the green, there were only 2 laps remaining, and for those laps, not only did he maintain his position, but he ended up net positive, coming to the stripe in 5th and ahead of Elliott. On the other side of the Roush garage, Stenhouse managed to win 2 superspeedway races that season, which brought an end to this team's embarrassingly long winless streak and granted a Roush driver a spot in the playoffs for the first time since 2014. Hey, maybe that means it'll be Trevor's turn in 2018. I mean, his team has been improving, right? Well, 2018 was a year alright for the 6 crew, and not in a good way whatsoever. Actually, in about the worst way possible. After the first 11 races, Bayne had netted 0 of anything and slouched his way to a 24.7 average finish. That was about on par with his Wood Brothers days, and not his good ones either. Needless to say, Jack Roush was none too pleased with this significant decline, and by this time was ready to take action. Following the Dover race, it was announced that Matt Kenseth would come out of his very short-lived retirement to take over the number 6 ride for select races throughout the rest of the year, in an effort by Jack mainly just to see what the heck was going on. By splitting the ride between Bayne and a Cup champion who had won a race in the previous season, the thought was that by directly comparing the 2 drivers' results, the team could uncover whether they had an equipment problem or a Trevor Bayne problem. And an equipment problem it was. Or, well, both actually. In Kenseth's 15 starts that season, he scored only 2 top 10s, both of which came back-to-back in his final 2 races. And with only 1 DNF, his average finish totaled a 19.9, practically the exact same as Bayne's in 2016 and 2017. Despite all that, the rest of Bayne's 2018 campaign was just about as inexcusable as his first half. When it was all said and done, in his 21 starts, he almost impressively did not luck his way upon a single top 10. In addition, he wrecked out 4 times and his average finish sank to a final 23.9. Oof. Oh yeah, and to add insult to injury, his longtime sponsor Advocare dropped him following the end of the season. And that's all, folks. Or so we thought. With no ride for 2019, most assumed Trevor would go down in NASCAR history as just that one dude who had an upset Daytona 500 win and did nothing else. And honestly, as of now, that will probably still hold true. Regardless, that was pretty much the wraps for his racing days, and Trevor probably accepted he would never get another chance in NASCAR's top ranks. In 2019, he didn't let these rough circumstances get the best of him, and instead he turned his focus to the coffee business, opening Mahalo Coffee Roasters to much success in the city of Knoxville. Now entering 2020, despite his yearning to get back behind the wheel, neither the money nor the opportunity was within his sights. Meanwhile, on the Truck Series side of things, Nice Motorsports was looking forward to a full-time effort with the four-time ARCA Midwest Tour champion and asphalt late model Phenom, Ty Majeski, who was planning to pilot their flagship number 45 Chevrolet. After a 3-win season and a runner-up finish in points with Ross Chastain the year prior, things were looking quite alright for the up-and-coming team. But due to a combination of their GMS Racing Alliance being unrenewed and Majeski's lack of NASCAR experience, the 45 truck did not post nearly the same results as it did with Chastain. After 15 races, even qualifying for the playoffs was a long shot for Majeski, as he had netted a mere 3 top 10s and set a miserable 16th in the standings. After Darlington, for apparently undisclosed reasons, but obviously due to either performance or sponsorship or both, Majeski was released from his ride and never returned. Yeah, let's cut to the chase. Who knows how long this video is going to be at this point. Nice Motorsports had an open seat for the remainder of this season, and they decided Bayne would be the perfect fit. According to Bayne, the deal was, quote, unexpected and came together really fast. And just like that, he was back in the door and granted a chance at a career recovery. His first start came at Darlington in Nice's already part-time number 40 truck, before he would replace Majeski in the 45 for the rest of his 2020 schedule, and immediately he seemed to pick up right where he left off, and I don't mean that positively. Except this time, there was no question that the blame lied on his team, as early on at Darlington and Richmond, he would suffer non-terminal mechanical problems that trapped him off the lead lap. Still, it's not like this prevented him from a great finish, since even before the issues, Bayne ran 20th or worse in both races. At any rate, he got his feet back under him by simply running the full races, and was ready to re-rack him at Bristol, one of his best tracks from his Cup days. Because of COVID protocols in 2020, qualifying was cancelled to limit interactions, and with his previous 29th place run and poor positioning in the owner's points, Bayne lined up back in 24th for the race. But this time, no matter where he started, he was bound to get to the front, as with a combination of his skill at Bristol and of equipment playing lesser of a role in a short track, and foreshadowing maybe his truck being a little too well set up, towards the end of stage 1 he climbed all the way up to P15. However, he was in no place to just ride it out to the end of the stage, because right on his bumper with 5 to go was the race leader Brett Moffitt, who was looking to trap as many guys a lap down as he possibly could. Somehow, by that time, Bayne had found a little extra speed, and after Moffitt closed in on him, he managed to hold him off by hugging the inside line tight and using other trucks as picks. Except these weren't other lap trucks. Bayne picked off both his teammate Carson Hosfar and Parker Kligerman right in front of Moffitt to make it to the green checkers in 13th and on the lead lap. After maintaining his position for the second stage, his team made the call to stay out under the scheduled caution in order to gain some much-valued track position, which would put him up to the third row for the restart. This turned out to be the right call without a doubt, as Trevor never slipped out of the top 10 for the remainder of the race, and over the course of the final green flag run, worked his way up a few more positions from 7th to cross the line in a very impressive 5th place. Unfortunately, the NASCAR officials did not find the 45 truck so impressive, since in the post-race inspection it failed to meet the minimum height requirement, thus disqualifying Bayne and crediting him with a last-place finish. Despite the setback, Trevor and the whole team knew they could replicate that performance later on in the season, especially at another less equipment-reliant track, and so they went into their next race together at Talladega with high confidence. Again, starting in the back, the 45 crew was wise to realize they were in no rush to get to the lead. And with no need for stage points either for any of the Nice drivers that day, Bayne hung out behind all the action with his teammates Kaz Grala and Bailey Curry most of the day. With around 30 laps to go, Bayne had made his way up to around the middle of the pack, and after he and his crew put together an outstanding green flag pit stop, he cracked the top 10 for the first time. All remained calm and single file on track, but with 9 to go, the pressure was setting in, and with team coordination, he moved out of line with Agrala to try to get something going on the outside. Luckily, they had others go with him, but just before things could really start to heat up, a caution flew for debris. And not just some joke caution, there's actually a full tire carcass laying on the track. But a late race restart at Talladega in the Truck Series, usually that doesn't end well. But this time, with 2 to go and Bayne starting on the inside of row 3, everything stayed clean enough to make it to the white flag, where any caution would end the race. After a great restart, Bayne entered the final lap second in line on the outside, right behind Stewart Friesen. With his years of superspeedway experience and his Daytona 500 winning talent, Bayne timed his move to the inside of Friesen perfectly once he got a big enough push, putting him into the lead going down the back straightaway for the final time. But just before entering turn 3, Friesen, who had wound up in no man's land all alone in the middle, got bumped hard and lost control, nosing to the outside wall and bringing out the yellow flag. But for Bayne, it came at just the wrong time. Mere seconds before the yellow lights came on, the rookie for Kyle Busch Motorsports, Rafael Lessard, had squeaked by him on the inside by a couple of feet, and so was given the win. With yet another heartbreak behind them, the 45 team finished out the season fairly strong, with a top 10 coming the next race at Kansas, and after an engine failure at Texas, wrapped up with an 11th at Martinsville and an 18th in the season finale at Phoenix. That was all Trevor had in store for him at Nice Motorsports, as I'm sure against his wishes, Brett Moffitt was tapped to drive the truck full-time for 2021, leaving him once again without any plans. And those plans never came, at all. Like 2019, he never attempted a race in any of the top 3 divisions of NASCAR, instead spending his time operating his coffee business and actually starting up a crate late model team for he and his brother Trey to race in part-time. But like 2019 again, Trevor was still hungry for another shot in NASCAR and stayed hard at work behind the scenes to finally get some funding behind him. In an absolutely huge break for him, supplement and protein powder brand Devotion Nutrition came to the rescue. And to the surprise of literally everyone, Trevor Bayne was able to cut a part-time deal with Joe Gibbs Racing's Xfinity program. In an interview with Bob Pockris, Trevor made it cut and dry that he was intent on getting back to victory lane. Quote, "I don't really have a goal of full-time next year or anything like that. My goal is to win. I'm not going to say 7 out of 7 races, but if we could win 3 to 5 or 6 of these things, that would be amazing." A bit ambitious, are we now, Trevor? Anyway, there's nothing wrong with some preseason hype, but even for arguably the best team this series, I knew right away it would be pretty unreasonable for him to come back after not being behind the wheel of a stock car since 2018 and having very limited racing experience in general since then, and just start winning. If he did, he would surely make the top of this list, but instead he came in at number 4, right between Kyle Weatherman and, spoiler alert for those still watching, Corey Heim. Still very impressive, but not groundbreaking. In his first start of the year at Auto Club, Bayne came out of the box hot, basically dominating the first stage with 24 laps led after qualifying in the 4th position. Unfortunately, in a matter out of his control, he would instantly lose all his track position following an abysmal pit stop by the 18 crew that dropped him all the way from the lead to 11th. And at a track so notoriously hard to pass at that it was planned to be reconfigured into a short track, his momentum was shot, and he rounded out stage 2 still outside the top 10. Thankfully, the crew was able to make up for their mistakes. They put some great adjustments in the car, allowing Bayne to creep up back to the front over the course of the final stage. In a chaotic and caution-filled into the race, Bayne reached a high of 2nd place at one point, and ended up settling for a still very solid 3rd place finish. Clearly, Bayne still had it, and this race pretty much set the tone for how the rest of his 2022 campaign would go. Close, but not quite. 2 weekends later at Phoenix, Trevor picked up a win of some type with a pole position, before yet again dominating the first stage. However, in another not-so-good trend we would see follow him throughout the rest of the year, he would fall off a bit as the race went on, coming in 4th in both the 2nd stage and the race. Still a great performance by any standards, but for a guy with only 7 planned starts desperately looking to win, that's not cutting it. Atlanta was a complete flop, his only of the season though, as while running 2nd, his own failed lane switch triggered a multi-car crash that saw his number 18 machine end up too damaged to contend for the win any longer. At Charlotte, he just never had a winning car and came home a mediocre 9th. And now entering Nashville, he was over halfway through his planned races with still no wins to show for it. In the Tennessee Lottery 250, he gained back his progress from before, and just like Phoenix, ran top 5 the whole day and earned a new season-high finish of 2nd. But really without any contest, the dominant car all day, Justin Allgaier. In his next race in New Hampshire, it was pretty much the same story, losing again to Allgaier by a sizable margin after leading 17 laps in the first stage. And finally at Talladega, start number 7 for Bayne, and really anyone's race, it just didn't happen either. In the cleanest Xfinity race there, well, ever, with every one of the 38 teams making it to the end, Bayne's big moment never came, and he crossed the line buried in the pack in 13th place. If you're Joe Gibbs, you see a guy just on the verge of a career recovery who in 7 races after years away from the sport has only somewhat torn up one of your cars and has been agonizingly close to a win on numerous occasions. Why not give him another couple shots? I mean, he's still got his sponsor, and who else is going to have a better shot to win the 18 car? Like Ryan Truex, Sammy Smith? I don't think so. So back at Las Vegas was Trevor Bayne, who at this point knew that any race he could get on the entry list for the rest of the year could very well be his last, so the urge to win was at an all-time high. In the race, his trend reversed, and he started out running towards the back of the top 10 for the first half, before coming back to finish 5th. As per usual, a solid outing and a great points day if he was running for the championship, but any outcome that didn't involve victory lane was in the end a letdown. Nevertheless, he was granted one last chance in the 2022 season, the next week at Homestead. It had been made official to Trevor, so he knew going in this was indeed his last chance to show off to all the team owners in NASCAR that he still has what it takes to compete at the highest levels of stock car racing, and that he is worth hiring for the coming year. His race weekend could not have started out better, as for the second time he posted the fastest lap in qualifying and would lead the field to green on Saturday. When the race went underway, like many times previously that season, Trevor Bayne had the best car out of the gate and went on to lead the opening 22 laps before round of 8 driver and favorite for the title Noah Gragson would power by to the inside. By the end of the first stage, Bayne would drift back to 4th, but as he communicated to his team, it was just not worth it yet. No need pushing too hard and collecting those iconic blue Homestead stripes. There was still plenty of racing to go, and although he was technically running for points in the series, stage wins were completely irrelevant to their goal. After a subpar pit stop, Bayne restarted back on the outside of row 4 for the start of stage 2, where he would remain for around the first 10 laps, before managing to make up 4 positions between laps 57 and 63, including a stunning 3-wide pass to the inside of both Sam Mayer and Landon Castle. With a considerably large gap between himself and the third-place runner Austin Hill, he would settle in for another P4 of the stage. With no holdbacks on the pit stop, he would come back out right where he entered, but on the restart, he wouldn't stay there long. The 18 crew must have poured their heart and soul into those adjustments because right off the bat, he would fly by the dominant car of the day and winner of both the stages, Noah Gragson. But for Gragson, this was not the first time he'd been the top car at Homestead. In 2020, in both the doubleheader races, he would lead 83 and 81 laps respectively, but would win neither, as in both races, Gragson had a car set for the long runs, and in both races, the yellow flag came out with 5 laps remaining. Then in the race there in 2021, Gragson was again leading with 3 laps to go, with no one in striking distance, before the lap car of David Starr blew a tire and slid up the track right into the nose of the number 9 car, instantly totaling it. So the biggest story going into that week was, of course, whether justice would finally be granted to Gragson at his best track. But at the start of the final stage, it was looking like they could be in for yet another crushing defeat. Still, that pass only moved Bayne up to P2, but it wasn't long at all before he was able to track down the leader Austin Hill and move by him as well. Similar to the years previous, though, Noah Gragson had a long-run car, and as the laps ticked on, he just got quicker and quicker. Eventually, after 24 laps spent out front for Bayne on that run, Gragson made easy work of him, putting a full 1 second gap between himself and the 18 car, less than 2 laps after the pass. That wasn't due alone to how fast Gragson had come to life, but also due to how fast Bayne had fallen off. After losing the lead within 10 laps, Bayne dropped like a rock all the way back to 5th, and was clocking in slower than the cars behind him before green flag pit stops came to his rescue. Or not really, because he got caught speeding and therefore would have to make a pass-through penalty the next lap. And just like that, now roughly 20 laps after he was out in front of everyone, he was now again staring at Gregson's bumper. But this time because he had just gone a lap down. A caution finally flew with 12 to go in the race to give Bayne the free pass, but the extensive cleanup from a multi-car incident postponed the restart until only 5 laps were left. Considering all things, he still came out of the mess extremely lucky, because so many drivers stayed out and took the wave around that Bayne, with fresh tires, was able to line up in the 5th row, when otherwise he'd be at the tail end of the longest line. But at a track like Homestead, you're not going to win the race that deep in the pack no matter how fast your car is, as there's simply not enough time in 5 laps to make that many passes. In the end, Noah Gragson did finally earn his long-awaited Homestead victory, and Bayne still recovered well to come home in 6th, but winless in 2022. Now in the 2022 offseason, still nothing has been announced from the Trevor Bayne camp. The renumbered part-time driver car at JGR, now the number 19, only has Ryan Truex scheduled as of this posting, and only for a handful of races. So hope remains strong that Trevor will be able to return for another partial season, especially if Devotion Nutrition keeps up their funding. But until we hear any announcements or the lack thereof, Trevor Bayne's legacy currently stands as an always reliable driver who peaked way too soon in his career with his 2011 Daytona 500 triumph. And regardless of what happens next, his 2022 season was still extraordinarily impressive considering his circumstances, and the story behind his return to the sport. But from a purely statistical standpoint, in Joe Gibbs Racing equipment, you have to win to prove you belong on the team, and that he came up short of. Well, that is all for episode 2 of the best part-time drivers of the 2022 season. Personally, I really hope to see Bayne back at JGR in the 19-car part-time next year, but let me know in the comments what you guys think. Also, if you did enjoy this video, make sure to drop a like and hit that subscribe button as you don't want to miss out on parts 3 through 6 of this series. Also, check out my previous video on Kyle Weatherman if you haven't already. But yeah, thanks again for the recent channel growth, and peace out.